One evening you had a good time. The conversation was genuine, the laughs were real, and nobody left upset. And yet the moment you got home, you closed the door, took off your clothes, lay down on your bed, and did nothing for 20 minutes. Nothing had actually gone wrong, but something inside you needed to stop. Maybe you thought, am I just an introverted person? Then you told yourself you were simply tired. And maybe the next morning you felt fine, but the pattern kept repeating. Every gathering, every dinner, every good night that still left you empty by the end of it. You started wondering if something was quietly wrong with you, if everyone else was leaving those same rooms feeling energized while you were counting the minutes until you could be alone again. They weren't. But that's not the whole story either. Psychology has a more precise name for this, and it changes everything. In this video, you're going to understand why you feel this way. If you're ready, type signal in the comments and let's begin. Neuroscience has mapped 5 patterns in people who experience exactly this. This isn't social anxiety. It isn't avoidance. Your nervous system processes the world at a different resolution than most people's, and that comes with a real physiological cost. Not occasionally, every time you're around people for long enough. By the final pattern, you'll understand that your need for silence after intense social interaction isn't weakness, and it isn't introversion. It's the output of a system running at full capacity. And by the end of this video, you'll realize that many of the things you've been told about yourself, the labels, the quiet comparisons, the suggestions that you should be more like someone else, were never accurate to begin with. They were someone else's misreading of a system they didn't have the framework to understand. A system that was never broken, just never correctly named.
Let's start with the first pattern. Call it the open channel. Think about the last gathering you attended. It didn't have to be big. Maybe 6 people sitting around a table. You were there, fully there. You were following the conversation, reading the room, noticing shifts in people's energy, 2 exchanges before anyone else did. You weren't trying to do this. It just happened. And 3 hours later, as you were leaving and sitting in your car with the engine running, you realized something strange. You couldn't actually remember deciding to stay that long. You were still processing. Here's the mechanism. Most people's brains enter a kind of energy-saving mode in social environments. Background noise gets muted, flickering lights are ignored. Tiny shifts in someone's tone get filtered out before they reach conscious awareness. Yours doesn't filter the same way. Your channel stays open. The flicker of the light above the table gets registered. The slight change in someone's breathing when a topic comes up gets registered. Even the half-second pause before someone answers gets registered. You're not consciously choosing to notice these things. Your brain archives them automatically. Most people experience the evening. You download it, and afterward you find yourself explaining why you're so tired. This isn't a malfunction. It's high bandwidth processing. Your system takes in and processes more signals in an hour than most nervous systems handle in an entire evening. The exhaustion you feel afterward isn't fragility, it's load. People didn't drain you. Everything they carried with them did, and your system's refusal to look away from any of it. The rule that says you should recover faster, it was never calibrated for this volume. But that's only the surface layer. The real engine runs deeper. Let's move one level down and look at pattern 2. Call this threat mapping. You walk into a room. Before you even take off your coat, your system has already started scanning. You haven't said hello to anyone yet, but you already know something. The couple in the corner argued before they arrived. The host looks calm, but it's a performance. 2 people on the left side of the room are speaking politely, but underneath there's tension. You didn't consciously analyze any of this. Your brain did it for you, automatically. In under 60 seconds, the anterior insula, the brain region responsible for reading social safety and belonging, activates the moment you enter a social environment and doesn't fully disengage until you leave. For most people, this system runs quietly in the background. For you, it runs in the foreground. That's why by the end of the day, your mind can feel almost unbearably heavy. Research on high sensitivity processing shows that this kind of sustained insula activity doesn't simply switch off when the social situation ends. It keeps running for hours, consolidating, cross-referencing, replaying. Moments you experienced earlier start replaying in your mind, being analyzed again and again. That's why silence feels necessary when you get home. Your brain isn't relaxing. It's finishing the job it started when you walked through the door. If your brain is still replaying conversations from last week, drop a brain emoji. Now let's move one step deeper and examine pattern 3. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't show on your face. Call it translation fatigue. Think about the last work event you attended, or any social situation where you needed to be on. You arrived calibrated to the room, the right energy, the right tone, the right version of yourself. You read every shift in tone and adjusted. You modulated your voice, your pacing, your word choice in real time, dozens of times, and no one noticed because you made it look effortless. But it wasn't effortless. It was translation. Your natural signal, the way you actually think, the speed you actually process information, the depth you naturally operate at, runs at a frequency most social environments weren't designed for. So you convert it automatically, fluently, constantly. And translation at that scale has a metabolic cost. It consumes working memory, it taxes the prefrontal cortex. It leaves a residue that a cup of coffee can't clear. The expectation that you should feel perfectly fine the next morning, that expectation was set by people who were never running that process. They weren't tired because they weren't translating. You were. You were never starting from the same baseline. Now, let's look at pattern 4. Call this signal recovery. You may have noticed something. When you leave a social environment, your system doesn't shut down immediately. Even when the noise is gone, the internal processing continues. Slowly, a kind of clarity begins to return. Not happiness, not exactly relief. More like resolution, like an image coming back into focus after hours of blur. This is your system returning to its natural frequency. The default mode network, the brain system active during rest, self-reflection, and identity consolidation, requires uninterrupted time to fully reboot after prolonged social exposure. For highly sensitive processors, this process takes significantly longer than average. Not because the reboot system is broken, but because more information was processed, and more needs to be reorganized before the system returns to baseline. Most people's sense of self travels easily through social noise. It adapts quickly and resets fast. Yours is more precise, more internal. Prolonged exposure to other people's energy blurs the signal. The silence you need isn't emptiness. It's the condition your signal needs to come back clear. You weren't losing yourself in those rooms. You were simply in an environment with too much interference for too long. Even when you left the room, the interference had already followed you into your mind. Now we reach pattern 5. The deepest layer, and the one that caused the most damage. Call it the wrong measurement. At some point, maybe in childhood, maybe in adolescence, someone noticed that you needed time alone after being around people and decided it meant something. That you were difficult, too much, or not enough. That the way you functioned was a problem that needed to be corrected. And because they said it with certainty, and because you were young enough to believe certainty meant truth, you absorbed it. You built your self-concept around their misinterpretation. But their measuring tool was designed for a different nervous system. The framework they gave you, the one that says you should want more noise, recover faster, and need less space, was built for extroverted processing as the default. It was never designed to read you accurately. It was the wrong instrument for the thing it was measuring. Every time you felt ashamed of needing silence, you were trusting a tool that had been miscalibrated for your system from the beginning. That shame was never evidence of a flaw.
It was the result of using someone else's ruler to measure something it was never built to measure.
The open channel, threat mapping, translation fatigue, signal recovery, wrong measurement. These are not separate things. They are different expressions of the same architecture. A nervous system that processes at higher resolution, filters less, carries more, and needs real silence in real time to return to itself. That isn't damage. It's a different operating system running in a world designed for another one. The cost you pay isn't a character flaw. It's simply the honest output of a system doing exactly what it was built to do in an environment that never accounted for it. The framework that called it weakness was measuring the wrong thing. You were never failing. You were being judged by criteria that never applied to you. If you saw yourself in this, in the quiet car, the closed door, the 20 minutes of stillness that nobody else around you seemed to need, then here's the truth. Your need for time alone isn't a personality flaw. It isn't avoidance. It isn't something you should apologize for or push through. It's your system telling you exactly what it needs to keep functioning at the level it does.
The rule that said you should need less silence, less space, less time to return to yourself
was never written for your system. It was never yours to carry. You can put it down now. If this explains something you've felt your entire life but never had the words for, drop a signal emoji.